your paperwork, it is towards the end. So it's a letter from Silke Akerson regarding the Midwifery Council. So hopefully everybody has had time to read this.
Where is
that the one about the fees?
Yeah, that is the one about the fees, correct.
Okay.
I mean, I just have this.
Oh,
Anything.
you don't have
Here,
paper.
you can have mine, I've got 2 copies.
Thank you.
Do you like paper? Are you a paper person?
I like paper,
Okay.
but I did read this online.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about this letter a little bit. I know that there was some confusion because everybody was so incredibly focused on the rules, the other rules relating to risk and risk assessment. So, in the letter, it talks about how we increase the license fee from $600 to $800. That is not necessarily true. I'm going to kind of go through some of this stuff. Then also in the second paragraph, it talks about how in 2013, the legislation said that the fee should be $500, which again, that is not true. And then we can discuss some of the other stuff. So in 2013, when House Bill 2997 passed, at that time, the fees were $1,200. I do have and we can go out to the website and look at the legislative, we can actually listen to the hearing if you want. And in the hearing, John Turpening, who is our LFO analyst, which is a legislative fiscal office, he's the one that does all the analyzing. He even stated on record in the hearing that it was $1,200. The licensing fee was $1,200, and that we waived the initial licensure fee, and then it was your first renewal, you paid the $1,200. So that's what the fee was back when that bill passed. And everybody know what bill that is? That's the mandatory licensure and kind of has the exemption for the traditional midwives. So that's from 2013 when that bill passed. And then in 2015, the office lowered the fee from the $1,200 to the $800. Did not waive the initial licensure fee, but it did allow for a reduction in fee for that was in rule. So as of July 1, 2015, an applicant applying for original license totaling $800 may be granted a $350 license fee discount for a total cost of $450 until July 1 of 2019. So that's the rules that went into place in July 1 of 2015. Mm-hmm. Well, obviously that rule was there for quite some time, and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, July 1st, 2019 showed up, and that fee discount went away. Mm-hmm. And everybody goes, oh, you guys raised fees. It's like, no, the fee was $800, there was a discount, and there was a discount for a set amount of time, and then that discount went away. And that has been in rule since July 1 of 2015. Mm-hmm. So is there any questions on that?
So where does she get her information that it used to be $600 and that there's this?
Because prior to the $1,200, it was $2,000 a year.
Yeah. And is there legislative history, like a recording of this committee talking about the intention to lower the fees and to keep them low?
So I listened to the recording of the Joint Ways and Means. I know there's a lot of titles here, but it's the legislative group that went through and adopted the bill. So it was House Bill 2997-Amendment 18 or some god-awful, because it made a lot of changes to it. In that meeting, John Turpening in the very beginning talked about the fees and the revenues, and we can listen to it and you guys can hear all of that. But then the legislators talked, and I can't remember her name, but there was an individual who was a midwife who testified during that meeting, but the discussion was more about what legislative drugs and devices is and the exemption for the traditional midwives. Mm-hmm. Then there was no discussion about the fee. I listened to it this morning, but I have zero issues listening to it now. We can bring it up. So,
how long was it?
About 30 minutes.
So, I need to clarify for myself. The legislature sets all of these people's fees. Like she has listed nurse midwives, nurses, so that's all being set in the legislature?
Kind of. So fees are brought forward by the agency or the board kind of event. So the Board of Medicine is its own individual board and its own individual agency, and then we have 16 boards and programs under us, so the office would bring something forward. But the intent is that fee is to be able to sustain that, the cost of operating that board. And that fee then, so if you have to do all the calculations and say, okay, well, the fee should be $250. And then you go to the legislation and say the fee should be $250, they have to, what they call is ratify it, so they have to vote on it. So you can lower fees without the legislation, but you cannot increase or establish a fee without the legislation approving it or ratifying it.
I am wondering, are nurses and nurse midwives, she's giving people of equivalent, job descriptions, at least the, birth part. Are their fees less because they have a greater pool of people?
That would be one of the major.
It's like three, because we have our midwifery license and then our nursing license, so it's like $300 total, and then we have our DEA license, which is like $500. So, I mean, we do, the DEA is not every year, but, it's like every 2 years. I don't know how often this is, but
But the Board of Nursing has a lot more individuals that they license than we do.
Yeah.
We're what, at 96 individuals?
But I think in responding, it would be good to get those numbers again.
Yeah.
What are you saying for nursing?
I have to look it up. I think
Oh.
it's like 300, it's like they're like the same price, but it's like, it's like 150 and 150 or 200, 200. I have to look it up.
And those people can all make a lot more money doing this than we can.
No, I just didn't, like this just to show, I mean, I want the fee to be lower, but I'm just curious that nurse midwifery isn't really 145. That's what you're saying. You're saying it's not, that's
years
not.
ago, so I can look it up.
Not
But
actually.
Christine, so you pay a nursing license and a nurse midwifery license to keep both active?
They're two separate
And then you
licenses,
pay-
nurse practitioner license and
Right.
And then you pay a drug,
and then I have a DEA
a
license. that's-
DEA, that's yearly or not
No,
yearly?
it's every 3 or 5 years. I can't remember how often. It was 3 years. but
For DA?
3 or 5 years that you have to renew.
I don't know, it could be, it's not more than 3. I just paid it $781
Yeah,
for
sometimes
us, and it's no more than 2. I mean, it's no more than 3, but I sort of think
And you
it's
paid
2.
$781?
And then our license is 924 every 2 years.
Yeah, so at least we should get these numbers, accurate.
So it's, I think it's 9.
I'm not certain what those, like how applicable that is to our discussion. I think that the issue is that regardless of if like the fee, like I know that the fee is and has been $800 for a long time, but we have the reduction. I think effectively, as far as what it feels like to be a practicing licensed direct entry midwife, the fee has increased. It now costs us more, and I think that the concern is that is difficult. It's difficult for people to pay.
I recognize that it's difficult, and I think it's being a barrier to good care. So that's my concern, is that people are going to choose not to be licensed because of it. But I do think that since the fees of other practitioners are in this letter, we kind of have an obligation to accurately communicate with the midwifery public what the actual fees are. Otherwise, this letter is confusing to me anyway, because I looked at this and was like, wow. So I only bring it up because it was brought up in the letter. I do think, and then we don't pay a separate DEA.
It's $150 for the nurse practitioner and $75 for prescriptive authority, and then $150 for the nursing license. So it's 400, essentially like almost $400.
Mine's here, it's $560 every 2 years, and then $781
Ours is every 2 years.
Anyway, so I don't know how to get lower. I mean, I do think that people are becoming traditional midwives because the fee is really expensive if you're not as busy. Whereas people who maybe were more of a community midwife not doing as many bursts might have kept their license going. I mean, I did read, the discussion that the legendary drug and devices is less of an obstacle. That's what I read on the, our chat page. So that seemed to give people some relief. But, I mean, I don't know what to do about it. I don't know that it's our authority. I guess that's what I'm trying to understand is, first of all, to give accurate information and then to figure out what our ability.
I don't understand either.
It sounds
What is
like
our authority?
our authority is to lower it. We can't raise it.
So this is Sylvie, so the fees the intent of the fees is to make you guys sustainable. So the intent of the fees is to cover the cost of supporting the board. And as you know, you guys are operating in the negative. So to lower what we need to work on, and we have been working on for years, is lowering expenses. As in trying to not have cases go all the way to hearing, which is where we implemented the settlement conference. Trying to get these really old cases done and cleaned up and, closed out. Just wrote it over myself. Those are the kind of things that we need to do. One of her discussions in here is, like in the last paragraph, is talking about spending, that, it's that trying to do a balance between the fees aren't enough to cover your guys' expenses. So let's try to figure out how to lower the expenses, because we're, legitimately your fees should be raised to cover the expenses, but we're not going to do that. We're going to allow you to continue operating in the negative. It means other boards in the office are help support you guys. But we've been doing that for, several years, and we can continue doing that. Our focus needs to be more on trying to reduce expenditures.
And it seems like what she's asking here, too, in the last paragraph, is for us as a board to be transparent about what are we doing to try to address this issue. Like, how are we trying to reduce costs? I don't know, does everybody know that the board is operating in the negative? To say that we've started this, the process where the midwife can come in and just talk about it before going to a hearing. And then she mentions here about attorney fees, which is, if we look at the budget, that's the highest thing, right?
This is Sylvie, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so do we be explicit about why it is that we have to have an attorney present for all the meetings, for all of the stuff that isn't even legal advice? How much would that decrease the cost? Because I'm sure you guys have talked about this before, like how has that gone, Because obviously it sounds like from here that that's what they're asking for.
Mm-hmm. So this is Sylvie. I think that there's this misconception that if she's not here, we're not paying her. So, like, if I don't visually see her, she can't bill us. So there's all this stuff. So you guys got to remember what you've been doing for the last 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
How many executive sessions have we had where she's given you advice on something? Mm-hmm. Well, she's probably spent a whole lot of hours back at her office accumulating that information. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I was thinking about is, okay, if we have all the executive sessions, first thing on the agenda, get her done and on her little way, and then she leaves. The instant you guys start talking about something that she needs to be aware of, guess what she's going to do when she's back in her office? She's going to listen to that recording. Would you rather have her listen to that recording later and not be able to ask you any questions until the next time you meet? Or in this room, right at that moment, and be able to say, okay, wait a minute, we talked about this, or do you want me getting and so that interaction. Mm-hmm. Because if she's not here to do that interaction and in that immediate discussion with you on something, she now has to bring that up at the next board meeting and say, I heard you talking about this. Is this something you want me to do? So it's just having her available at all times. Yeah, it sounds like it costs a lot, but it actually might cost more not having her here and knowing exactly where you're going with the conversation, mm-hmm. and have to listen to it later, come to the next board meeting and say, okay, last month you were talking about this, we need to talk about it again, mm-hmm. because now I have advice on it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, just because she's not physically here, or if she was to leave a half an hour early, it's not really gonna save you that much. Does that make sense?
Yes, and are you also saying that the bulk of her time isn't really in the few hours that she's here? It's in the hours that she's researching things and writing recommendations for us and all of that?
Yes.
So all the behind-the-scenes stuff is all billed, and that's the higher percentage?
Yes.
The 5 hours here?
Yes.
And do all the boards under this office use the same attorney?
Yes.
So you're the attorney for this whole group?
She's my best friend. No, I'm just kidding. Yes. Yes.
Not just
No.
For all of HLO and the boards.
So this is the other thing, this is Sarah, that I'd like to say is that this past debt happened, a large part of it happened before a lot of us were even board members. And I don't think it's good to, I don't know what you're allowed to do, but I think it's a burden to have a past debt that was created, under different rules, under different boards. And I think, I would like to see that debt forgiven and erased.
So would we all.
We do.
I've got stuff too that we could throw in there.
Yes, so this is Sylvia, so what she's referring to, back in, I think it was right around when I first started, so 2010-ish, somewhere around in there. God, that was crazy.
That's correct, yeah.
Geez. There was a lawsuit. The board did have lots of monies, and then there was a lawsuit, and it sucked those monies up real quick. And that's this lingering effect that has been going on for some time.
Yeah, it feels, I don't know what to do about it, but it feels really unfair for a young, new midwife just starting out to be carrying the burden of, maybe a 20-year-old debt. Just feels really unhealthy for this profession. And I don't know whether that would be, at some point, that just doesn't seem right to me. Like in other
I also feel like, oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, no, that's
Sorry.
okay, go ahead.
I'm trying to hold in mind that our intent for this board is to protect the public good. And I think that people having licenses is better than people choosing to be traditional midwives and not being able to carry these legend drugs and devices that are potentially life-saving because of cost. And it seems like the more we raise the cost of a license, the fewer licensees we have, which brings in less money. It seems a little bit penny-wise, pound-foolish. And I just feel like for the long-term stability of this license and trying to do the most public good, if there's any way the office can decrease the fee at least back to the $600 that it was, that would be of great immediate and long-term benefit to the licensees and the public that they're serving.
This is Wendy. I have to agree, given that the debt is huge and the addition of $200 a year times 96 members is not a huge amount of money, and given the burden that exists, why not just expand it for all eternity if we're able to? I don't know how we're not going to get out of this burden of debt quickly. And it's a really high fee. I agree. It's a really high fee.
Even the 600 puts it higher.
I agree. It is. It
ones
is
who
higher.
have more.
And I understand why. I do understand why. But it is a burden.
The thing is, it feels an additional burden to have the state refuse to allow licensees to begin prenatal care without pre-approval. I'm not saying do births without, if you you have to be pre-approved to get reimbursed.
Are you talking about OHP? Sarah,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? A little while.
I'm saying that the mixture of OHP with this high fees makes it feel even more of a burden. That's what I'm trying to say, is that it's one thing to be supported in taking OHP and another thing to be not supported in OHP and then have this high fee. Those two things together feel unfair. Bye, Colleen.
Bye, everyone.
What are you going to go do, something fun?
No, I'm meeting with Silke and Celeste about the rules.
Oh, okay. Have fun.
But we can't impact OHP.
No, I'm just saying how I feel.
I know.
I'm just saying how I feel, that those two things together feel, they feel, that begins to feel punitive, because the whole reason we went for licensure was to be able to serve low-income women better. And so then to be given these high fees is really defeating a lot of the purpose. And so we have people not choosing to become licensed.
Can we do something like that, decide to extend the discount, for, say, like 2-year intervals, where we're going to reassess every 2 years, with the, with the observation that since we started doing these conferences with midwives, or offering the settlement conference, that the costs have been going down, and to see, it could be useful for the public to know that, because it seems like there are, and just in the year that I've been here, there's certain personalities who have a complaint and they're just going to take it all the way just for the purpose of the fight, and realizing that that's also what's causing the fees to go up for everyone. Isn't that true? What happened however many years ago when all that debt accrued it was mostly over a case, right?
Mm-hmm. This is Sylvia, yes.
So, maybe people don't know that when they're thinking about, I'm a midwife in a community of midwives, and we decided as a community that we wanted to be licensed for the benefits of that, and that means that maybe I consider my sister midwife and her situation and her fees. You know what I mean? When dealing with the board, when there's a...
Well, I don't think that I'm not sure what you're saying. The goal isn't if you feel like somebody did something in error and you've tried, whatever, I'm not saying what situation, I'm not sure what situation, and obviously you can talk to people and, use peer review and use your professional organization to try to get people to do safe midwifery, but I don't want people to feel like they shouldn't report something that's not safe. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I'm talking about if you have a report made against you, like being cooperative.
That's, I see.
And like wanting to have justice for yourself, of course, but like considering what the consequence is of continuing to go on and on.
Oh, I see.
Like having a compromise mentality.
No, I agree. I agree.
That could be significant in the fees. It seems like when you put up the budget and like how much it costs to actually go to a trial with something that could have maybe been
Yes.
decided internally.
That seems true.
So Meredith, are you saying that you think that the board should draft a response to this letter?
Yeah, it's
that's like a
asking for
public letter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that should be one element of the letter addressing how we're trying to reduce costs.
Right,
Essentially.
without blaming midwives.
And
but
how the
just saying-
community can be engaged in helping us reduce costs.
Correct.
In other words, okay, got it.
So people have an idea of where the money is actually going. I'm
Yeah,
not sure
totally.
if people know.
The other
And
thing,
isn't it also the case that like we as the board members didn't set the fees? Isn't that part of the rule, the purview of the office?
So this is Sylvie. So yes, the office lowered the fees back in So there's a process to it, you can't just do. So back in April 17th of 2015, the office wrote a letter to DAS, which is Department of Administrative Services, to submit a fee decrease. So that's when the letter was submitted over, and that's when the fee went down July 1 of 2015.
And where did that stem from? I don't remember at all. I mean,
Well, there was a whole bunch that went over, not just for this board. So it says, I gotta find the paragraph that talks about this. The direct entry fee reduction is sought for different reasons. Litigation costs increased dramatically for the board in 2009-2011 biennium and continued on into 2013, with associated DAS risk charges extended even further into 2015. Due to the natural lag in the assessment process and the arrangement made with DAS in distributing the cost over 2 biennia to avoid these substantial expenditures hitting all at once. Even with a dramatic increase in licensing fees up to $1,200 for much of the time frame to offset these costs, the DEM cash balance slid to a low of $78,732 to the negative in June of 2013. However, as the litigation costs returned to more normal levels and the ripple effect of the DAS risk charges substantiated, they have been steadily climbing back toward the positive balance. While the cash balance is improving based on the conversations with licensees, the DEM Board, and the Oregon Midwifery Council, DAS CFO, which is Chief Financial Office, LFO, which is Legislative Fiscal Office, and Representative Kenny Geyer in January 2015, it was determined that even after the discounts were applied, the licensing fee level was still so burdensome to the licensees that reductions could not wait until after they had returned to the positive cash balance. Following negotiations, Representative Kenny Geyer, the board, and the council and HO agreed to a plan where the new and renewal fees would be reduced from $1,200 to $800 per year, with additional discounts applied administratively and reviewed periodically to determine if further adjustments necessary to ensure the board has sufficient funding while also keeping rates affordable for applicants and licensees.
Yeah.
The analysis and details related to the DEM fee reduction in particular are fragmented and extensive, and as a result are not attached here, but would be happy to meet with you to talk through the documentation if you are interested.
It seems like that's.
Sounds like
Can we just
response.
resend that letter? I mean, I feel like that's all still applicable.
It is, yeah.
I agree.
Because I feel like, I mean, as a board, I feel like, and I may be wrong, but we have some obligation to keep ourselves viable. I mean, we can't just drop the fees to zero and say, oh, well, you know, the HLO's just got to deal with us, you know?
Well, not zero, but not, yeah, somewhere between.
But if it was calculated that 1,200 was the viable number to keep us afloat, and we've already dropped it to 8, like we've already dropped it to a number that's not viable to keep us afloat, you know, and that calculation
I think
was
that 1,200 wasn't that for 2 years? 1,200 over 2 years, so it was 600 a year?
I don't know.
And they stated that the legislative costs were going down at that time.
Yeah,
So they're,
Sylvie's
like,
shaking
making
her
it-
head about 1,200 over 2 years.
It was $1,200 each.
Okay, I misheard that.
Yeah, it was per year.
It was per year. It's always been an annual license.
I mean, if we're going to respond to the letter about cost.
So this is Sylvia, so we have to be careful. This is a public comment. This is not an inquiry.
Yeah.
So one of the things is that you guys now are discussing this stuff. We can make some decisions. We can post some information out on the website.
I was just going to say that if we were going to respond to some degree about cost-cutting measures or whatever, I mean, and it may just be the attorney in me, but it bothers me that that there's all this misinformation in here. If it is misinformation and it bothers, I want to get to the bottom of it, and like, it bothers me that she says there's legislative history about the intent of the fees if that doesn't really exist. And maybe it's not important, maybe we can just let it slide and not address it and just let it be, let that be the prevailing wisdom. them, you know, but.
And we can draft a response. I'm not saying we won't.
Yeah.
I'm just saying this is a comment that if you feel like we need to draft a response, we can draft one. It's
not me feeling, I mean, I don't know if we feel.
I think we need to do that for the good will of the board. I mean, I think the board has to be seen as, you know, as having some knowledge. And so if there's a different knowledge, I do think we have a responsibility to communicate that accurately.
I mean, I do agree as well, given that there's a documented background to this. And that Kenny Geyer was involved with, right? I mean, I'm sort of perplexed by this statement of we've talked to her and she's going to come and talk to you. What the heck does that mean? I mean, I don't understand what that means, and I don't understand what she thinks we're going to do about her. And she was involved with the decision making, right?
I just read the letter. I don't remember what happened back in 2015.
So this is Heather. A few things pop into my mind. One is that legislators contact HLO on a variety of things on a variety of subjects, and HLO usually responds to them. So were the legislator to contact HLO on this, they would normally respond. Some other thoughts that you could do in terms of, you'd mentioned transparency and wanting to communicate to your community some accurate information, is you could, like Sylvie said, post information on the website that addresses these things. Maybe you could say what fees are for other boards. Maybe you could say, you know, what the things are as to why this fee is so high as it is. Maybe you can say what you're doing to address it. And then you, as a board, could also choose to respond to Silke or not to respond to her. You could say that, you know, we're addressing your concern about transparency, we're putting it on the website. You could go into further detail if you wanted to with her. But as Sylvie said, this is something that she sent. You don't necessarily need to respond in a letter form, so that's your choice. And how you choose to do that, if you want to respond, is an option. But it sounds like that third concern is communicating accurate information to the public. So not just to Silke, but so that your community knows what's going on as well. So those were a few things that popped into my head as I was hearing your discussion.
I mean, how it feels is that even if we do lots of stuff to bring down the cost is not going to go down because we have this old debt. And
It doesn't go away. No matter how much you wanted to, it will never go away.
So at least we can try to not make more.
Correct?
The only suggestions I have from being on the board is sometimes you get a case and we don't get the chart notes for, maybe a year or for a long time. And it would be really helpful before we even assign it to an investigator to have the chart notes. Because what happens a lot of times is we'll look at this and we'll be kind of confused. We'll be like, well, we don't know what happened with this case, really. Whereas if we had the chart notes at the same time, and I don't know how the midwifery community would feel about that, but I think we would save some money if we had some accurate chart notes up front, because I think we're adding costs because we're having things investigated, and some of the times all we're asking for is chart notes. So if we have them up front, maybe that would save us money.
So this is Sylvie. So there's a specific protocol that you have to go through. So you guys as a board have to tell us to start an investigation. So that's when it gets signed to an investigator. So we can't just ask for chart notes before we before you guys review the complaint. So you know how you guys review a complaint, and based solely on that, you have to just tell us either to sign it to an investigator or not. Once we assign it, then we can get what you need, but we can't just automatically get what you need and skip that first step.
And some of that might have to do with privacy laws, like, right?
Well, it's in here, and it's in here too.
Right, like you have to get the client to sign a release of information to allow us to even see those notes.
Yeah.
Right, like it gets really complicated.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that would make it so much easier, but you can't skip those first few steps.
Yeah, because we are I don't know what it costs, but, you know, we're sometimes putting a lot of expense just to be able to look at chart notes.
Yeah, the process is weird that we get like maybe 3 lines about a complaint, you know? You really have no clue what happened.
Well, but that's what the board, I mean,
Yeah,
that's what
that's the
they get, and
process.
that's, yeah.
Yep.
So do we want to propose to keep them at 600 for a certain period of time while we continue to?
I'm confused about this.
Are we allowed to do
I
that?
know.
It sounds like what you just read was that we're giving this discount that is for this amount of time to July, and that will be reviewed periodically. Is that what it said? So let's do that.
Well, I thought the discount was to $450. Or has it changed to be to $600?
So there's 2 different discounts. This is why you're getting confused. One is for the initial licensure, and then one is for your renewal. So the initial licensure was the $450, and then the renewal is $600.
Got it. Got it.
But the fees are $800 to $800.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
We want to have both discounts or just one, or?
I mean, we can decide that, right? That's our prerogative, but we also have to decide to make ourselves still exist.
But we will also run the risk of not existing if our fees are such that people keep dropping out of our career, out of our profession.
Well, and I think that one of the things, like, if the litigation was the thing that made for, you know, this debt, having people be more licensed and adhering to rules has the potential for decreasing that debt over the long haul instead of paying. There will be less litigation, I think.
So this is, I think, one of the intentions with the bill back in 2013, because they called it a mandatory licensure bill, and then there was an exemption for traditional midwives. And as we've been going along, we've realized that that exemption for traditional midwives is pretty broad, which is not what I think the intent was. And at the time, when I was listening to that legislation, there was 120 licensed midwives. And so you're down to 97 because several of them have chosen to go to not all of them, but, you know, some of them have chosen to go to the traditional midwife route. So I think the intent was that it wouldn't be as many traditional, and that you would get more licensees with the mandatory license, and that's not what actually ended up happening. So it's this constant, like, trying to weigh it not being too expensive, but then supporting, but then, you know. So you guys are doing exactly what everybody's been doing for as long as I've been here. So it's not a new discussion. So, but if we do decide today to offer a discount, if you guys continue this conversation and decide, we have to go through the rulemaking process to do it, so it does not happen overnight. So just so you understand that you have to open rules, and it will go into effect at a certain point.
So you have to open rules like this particular rule about fees?
Correct.
Yep. And then give a public comment?
Correct.
Yep. And then...
Correct.
So what kind of schedule would that look like?
So it's usually a much faster schedule than you wordsmithing all your umpteen your rules. So that'll be happen a whole lot faster than that. So if you guys make a decision today, we could probably get it into place, I would say, by July 1. I mean, that would be a year of no discounts, and then it would go back into effect. And then you have to also make a discussion about how long you want the discount to go before you address it again.
I mean, this is one, does the legislature have any, any ability to say, sorry, you guys, you can't do this because you're in the red and this is, so who says that? I mean, are you in charge of saying that, or do you have to get approval for us to?
So part of the rulemaking process, that's why rules can't change overnight. But part of that rulemaking process is that Sammy has to send a copy of those rules to the legislature.
Yeah.
And they get to see that, and they may go, no.
Right.
And then we can't adopt that rule.
So we can be the good guys, I
we can
guess,
say we
right?
tried our
I mean, we should just say $200 for everyone and
Oh,
send it in.
yeah.
I mean, but it
That's-
just seems
yeah.
like we can do whatever we want, and then, but ultimately we don't.
So this is, Heather, maybe just to clarify, it sounds like, and I haven't done this before, so I'm not sure, if the board were to make a decision today to offer a discount, then the next piece would be you writing a letter to DAS to inform them of the reduced piece like you did before, is that correct?
That's incorrect. So, because
Okay.
the fee stays at 800, the fee is not changing. So in the letter, it talks about an administrative discount, and that's what an administrative discount is when you write it in rules. So here's a copy of the 2015 rules.
Okay.
And so you write it in here, and it needs to be very specific, like it was before, which is where the rule went away.
Will you read that?
Sure.
If you actually permanently
What
reduce
it
the
says
fees, then you
specifically?
go from that.
Yeah, if you want to permanently change a fee, then it has to go through DAS.
And that's what that letter was about?
Correct.
Okay. so
Yeah, that was changing it from the $1,200 to the $800. And it's been $800 since July 1 of 2015.
So
That was not changed. The
But
fee's
we've
been
given
$800.
a $200
But then you get a discount with an administrative rule,
Got it,
correct?
right.
Okay, so two different processes.
Correct.
So then the next piece, if a decision was made, would be rulemaking, and then that would be set in place. There wouldn't be oversight of that in, say, DAS wouldn't have oversight of that particular rule. What you're saying is that during the rulemaking process, those rules go out to the legislature, all rules go out to the legislators to...
Just like the regular process. And if you had a legislator who said, whoa, what are you doing?
Then they could
Then they
change
would
it
contact
statute.
Sammy and say, no, you're not doing this.
Right.
Or they could address it the next legislative session if they wanted to
Right.
make some changes there.
But they
or
couldn't
something.
just raise it back to the 1,200.
They could not approve the rule.
Right.
They could agree to
They
not
can't
approve
go back to
our-
the 1,200, no.
They could not approve our
Rule.
discount, right? I mean,
Correct.
that's,
But 800's where it's at.
So why don't we
Right.
just write a letter, whatever needs to happen, about proposing that we just keep extending that administrative discount for another however many years?
Sure. So here's
They
what it said before. It said, as of July 1, 2015, an applicant applying for original license totaling $800 may be granted a $350 fee discount for a total cost for the license of $450 until July 1 of 2019. An application fee of $150 must be paid in order to grant the $350 license fee discount. The license fee discount is available to individuals who meet all applicable requirements for direct entry midwifery licensure under, and it gives the rule number, and reside in Oregon. Only applicants who have not held a direct entry midwifery license in Oregon qualify for the discount. So that's what it used to say. And that's for the initial licensure. And then there's the one for the renewal. As of, it says January, but it's supposed to say July. As of July 1, 2015, an applicant applying to renew a license totaling $800 may be granted a $200 discount for a total cost for the license of $600 until July 1 of 2019. The license fee discount is available to individuals who meet all renewal requirements for direct entry midwifery licensure under ORAR, rule number, blah, blah, and reside in Oregon.
Okay.
So that's what can go back in, do you want that to go back into place? Just basically keep it as is? It won't go into place probably until July 1, so that'll be a year that the discount was no longer there.
But to extend
And then put it back in, and then,
until July 1st.
so we can put the discount back in, and you need to talk about how long you want it to go, and it can't go forever.
Okay. Well, it was for 4 years to start out, right?
So you want to do 4 years again?
how was 4 years selected? Yeah.
I'd have to go back and listen to the recordings of the board
Right. No, I
meetings.
know.
for-
Yeah.
4 years seems good.
Can you read?
I mean, given that, I mean, we've worked our debt down a little bit over time, so we are active, I mean, I think as a board, we're actively trying and succeeding at working down the debt. I mean, and so I think one could argue that our mode of doing that by providing this was not unsuccessful, right? I mean, and so maybe we decide as a, kind of risk benefit that we're working and we find this acceptable, and maybe then the legislature wouldn't find it acceptable, but I think we do.
Well, and this is Sylvia, and one of the things, if they contact me, I can obviously send them out to the website and they can listen to our recording of our discussion so they can hear what we're all saying. But one of the things that as we were talking about that, what I was thinking too is you guys have spent the last couple of years have been a hardcore rule writing and a lot of research and advice, and can we do this, can we not do that? And hopefully that major rule writing stuff, it will not last another 2.5 years. So I think you guys are now down to 3 good solid topics, and it shouldn't take that long. And so I think your expenses are going to go down even more because of that.
Well, and the thought with rulemaking too was to have your rules be as clear as possible and to address some of those issues so that then practitioners don't have ambiguities, and then you don't have the cases that come about through unclear rules. So through the rulemaking process that you just engaged in, there will hopefully be less cases from that.
Yes.
So I mean, I think we are doing, because all these things, for one, they take time. But all these things that you guys have been doing is a long-term fix of trying to not have your expenses going up and trying to make clear rules, trying to get through a very hard time of rule writing and needing things to be able to be withheld up in court. So if we were to go to a hearing, they would, be very clear. And so I think those are things, it costs a lot to get there, but we're now getting there. And so our expenses should start going down.
So how about we make that proposal?
Sure.
And then we put, it seems like there's several bullet points that we could put on the website and to a letter to Silke if we wanted to about what the fees are for and what are all the things that we're doing actively to try to decrease them, or decrease the cost, what the costs are. And that the rules are mostly done, that the conferences, so that it's more
And that we support extending the discount. That this is a discount, because what she says there is obviously isn't true.
Right, to make clarity. That seems important to be accurate. I agree with you, to not just drop it, that wouldn't be that complicated to just say, by the way, this happened in 2015, the fee was this, then it was that, now it's been a discount, and so it wasn't an increase.
Maybe to clarify the history a little bit. The tit for tat is frustrating, but this whole reality of alternative facts is just getting to me, To say that something happened that didn't really happen just really bugs me a lot.
So this is something that totally fine. I get you. So we've got several things on the table here, so I want to make sure that we have them down, because Sammy has to take notes and we've got to do a bunch of work. So for one, we're going to draft a response to the letter and talk about fees. Here's what they were, here's when they changed, here's what the legislation, so the 2012, here's what, for 2013, during the bill, they were $1,200 on blah, blah, blah. Just kind of outline that. And then also have a paragraph that talks about some of the things that the board has done and our anticipation that expenses will go down now that we're hopefully done with the majority of the rule writing and needing advice on individual rules, that kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And then once Sammy gets that letter done, and Heather can help make sure that it's all accurate and perfect, then Callie can take pieces of that letter and post that out on our website, on your guys' website. Mm-hmm. So that will help with that clarification. The other thing too is that if you guys want us to, we can email a copy of that letter to all of the emails that we have for all the licensees, because sending an email to licensees doesn't cost anything, but when you send snail mail it does. Mm-hmm. So we could at least some email, not that everybody's email is 100% accurate or up to date or current, but we could at least try that. So then it's going out to all active licensees. It's a copy of the, because one would assume that a whole bunch of people are out there thinking that we raised the fees, and So does that work for you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one. That's the communication piece. The other thing is we're going to draft a rule and get that rule writing process started. So we'll have very similar to what it said before about so it'll say as of July 1, 2020. I worked 20 already. An applicant applying for original licenses or blah, 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 blah. So it'll be the same as that, and you want it for 4 years. So the fee, come July 1, will go back to what it was.
Yes.
Got it? Got that, Sammy?
And then after you do that, a public comment period has to exist?
Well, prior to the July 1, there will be a public comment period, yes.
Okay.
That's why everything takes so long.
Sure.
So because you have to do the notice in the Oregon Bulletin, and you have to open it for public comment, you have to go before the legislature. All this stuff has to happen prior to it implementing.
Okay.
So we got it.
We got it.
Okay.
Are we gonna have 6 months of people being late on their licensure fees then? Is there a late charge? Well, it's just July 1st and July 1, they're paying more money, right?
Well, you're going to pay if you're late, so
Right,
that's not a
that's
very
right,
good
yeah.
idea.
Yeah, is there a late fee?
This is Sylvia,
Yeah,
you
there's a
also
late
run
fee,
the
so-
risk of not being reimbursed if you get OHP payments or any kind of
Can't file
payments.
birth certificate
Can't file a birth certificate if your license isn't active.
or nothing.
So there's some downfalls
Yeah.
of intentionally renewing lanes.
Yeah, so this maybe should have been brought to our attention 6 months ago.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, if we extend this for 4 years, can we revisit it before it goes, you know, like, I feel like it's
Before it
going away.
passes,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
going away, and so there's gonna be this time, I don't know, so that it, so there's no gap.
Wasn't brought to our attention.
So maybe in 3.5 years, we look at it again.
Calendar
I'll
that.
still be here.
We did talk about this at one meeting, because I remember bringing it up.
Yeah.
And I think it was just, the office sets the fees, not the board, and we moved on. It was a pretty quick discussion, but we did address this before July 1st.
Well, there are nuances to this. I mean, this is not super straightforward, obviously, since we just spent 45 minutes talking about it.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a plan? Now
You've got a
we're moving on.
plan?
I have a question. So normally I wouldn't bring comments and stuff about fees to the board, because it's HLO.
Yeah,
In
the
this
office
case,
sets
are
the
we-
fees,
Are we
right?
going to bring it?
Do it. Say again.
Are we going to bring the comments about the fees in during the rulemaking to the board, or are we just going to do it the normal HLO way?
It'll be interesting. Well, since they meet on a regular basis, we'll be able to bring them the comments.
Okay. Got
I
it.
mean, it's different if you only meet like twice a year, then we'd have to do a special meeting, but you guys pretty much meet all the time, so it shouldn't be hard to get them
Pretty much
to.
here every month.
I just want to ask one other question. Is it ever possible to have a sliding scale to keep people licensed? Like you do less than 10 based on the number of birth certificates you've turned in, or you do more, you pay a little more, as a way of keeping people licensed, like maybe they're doing something else in their life at that point, so they're doing fewer births, they have young children, I don't know what it would be, but could not having those people drop their licenses if they do under a certain number. I'm just trying to think of how we can keep people licensed when they have low volume births, because they might increase their volume again later.
Yeah, I mean, physicians have an inactive fee. You keep your license, but you're not practicing. It's not a lot less, but it is less.
But that's not practicing at all versus, is it not practicing
That's
at all?
true, that's a good
versus-
point. It's not a
versus
sliding
practicing a
scale,
little
right,
bit?
you're right, it's all or none.
Does the board have the authority to set like a new fee schedule or create a new category of fees, such as, we don't have that authority? Okay.
So the office has the authority of setting the fees, but I have to go to the legislation and say, here's what the new fee is.
Right.
So everything has to be ratified by the legislation.
But does anyone have sliding scale?
Not that I'm aware of.
Darn.
Technically, tattoo
Well,
event facilities
it's actually pretty serious, because we're having
Okay.
people drop their licenses.
It's not, I know.
Well, and it seems like it's hard, like costs, like it's a hard time for people. Everything's more expensive, people aren't making as much money, like this
So-
may be a continuing trend of people having difficulty paying the fee.
there are things, so this is Sylvie, I'm on, and Sammy's in it sometimes too. So there's a group of us that talk. So there's me, because you guys are all under me. And so we're trying to keep aware of everything that's going on. So there's a group of us that talk about every couple of weeks. And then there's the director who oversees birthing centers. And then there's I can't remember his name. There's a gentleman who works for, who oversees the Oregon Health Plan. And so there's a lot of things that they're trying to make sure that everybody's aware of, so that the coverage is a lot better and a lot cleaner and easier to get. So there used to be where you had to opt out of the Oregon Health Plan in order to have a midwife, right? I'm not sure the lingo of this. So now what they're trying to do is to where they get it to where you don't have to do any of that. You can still code things, so the midwife can still be doing a bunch of stuff, even if they're going to a hospital or even if they're with another provider.
Right.
So they're working on this where you...
Separation.
Right, and because it's not an opt-out now, it's called, I can't remember, but they're working on it, so this group is talking about it, and because I bring up the concerns that you guys bring up about how hard it is for the for you guys to have access to Oregon Health Plan payments. And just because your intention of having a home birth and you're doing all this stuff and going along and all of a sudden, ooh, something came up, can't do that anymore, doesn't mean that you guys shouldn't be,
Compensated.
right, and they all, so there's this Dana Hargiuani, she's the one running this stuff. So she's making sure that she's on the same page with all these different groups. I keep her updated on what you guys are working on rules, and that you're still having this discussion about the twins and that kind of stuff. Yeah, so she's the one who's running this group and trying to get the Oregon Health Plan and everybody, the birthing centers, the midwives, everybody as much on the same page as possible.
Yeah.
So hopefully the Oregon Health Plan stuff will start working smoother. I don't know when.
I mean, because it's an unbundling of a previously global fee, and that's been really difficult.
And especially since, our maternal health statistics and our percentage of people having early prenatal care is so low. So you want as many people to get that first appointment, risk them out, to be risked out, but get them in for care. And I've said this before, a lot of midwives are their only community-based prenatal care in many, many, many communities in Portland. And so you want them to be able to start prenatal care and then maybe refer them successfully if they're high risk. But to not start prenatal care is really dangerous. So I hope that you will be a voice for that, because we should have everybody getting first trimester prenatal care. And I think if we set that as a goal and use midwives as helpers and not see them as, oh, this person has to go through all this care and then get approved, it's really not a good public health decision. And
There
then
are changes being made on that already.
what?
With OHP, there are changes being made with that already. That's part of the process that's happening, is that even if somebody does risk out, that we can still get paid for a prenatal or two.
Yeah, of course.
And it doesn't require the whole prior authorization process.
Yeah.
That's one of the things from the OHP hospital work group subcommittee. One of the recommendations that is followed with OHP and the CCOs, and the CCOs is also going to, and the CCO 0.0, the use of bill without people.
So Kelsey, you're cutting in and out really, really bad. And we can't hear you at all right now.
Well,
That's fine. I was just trying to say that there
we don't have
is
to keep
OHP
talking about
stuff in process.
I just wanted to thank you for working on that. So okay, I'm just saying thank you.
Yeah, no, and what I was trying to hear what Kelsey was saying though. So Kelsey, like I said, you're cutting out. So you're saying that they have already implemented some of these things?
It's part of the, there was a big out-of-hospital work group that made a lot of recommendations, and OHP is implementing some of them. And one of those things is that instead of people having to disenroll from their CCO to get midwifery care, that midwifery care is going to be a carve-out, so people can stay in their CCO and keep seeing their regular doctor, and at the same time, midwives can bill fee-for-service.
Oh, good, good. And that's occurring already.
Yeah. That's what
I don't think it hasn't been implemented
they're
yet,
starting it.
but it's coming.
That'll make a big difference.
Wow,
That'll be
yeah.
good.
Well, Nathan's the surgeon one that I know.
Okay, so we
Hopefully
can't
things like that start helping
Right.
midwives be able to, you know.
be more sustainable.
Yeah.
So we don't have any authority to talk about, any more about a sliding scale, or is that something we want to try to pitch to the legislature?
I think going before the legislature, you might open a big can of worms that you may not want to, because the intent of a board is to be sustainable. And so I don't know, I mean, we'd have to have a legislative concept to go forward before the board. So it might be, Silke and her group may trigger going to the legislation. Because they may say, look, these fees are too high, you know, we
Or
don't
it may
make money.
increase enrollment. If there was a sliding scale, maybe there'd be more licensed, right? Could
Because it'd be
increase our
easier for
fees.
people
That's
to
what I
choose
think.
that.
I think you'd have more licensing.
So it could increase revenue.
I would also like to discuss the possibility of having some kind of hold status so that you could have like a lower fee to maintain your licensure, but if you're not doing any births,
Right.
like if you decide to go to grad school and you're not going to practice midwifery while you're in school,
Why, you know?
if there was some way to like hold your license,
Over 3 years.
that would also be great. I think that that's something we've talked about before. I think Colleen brought that up. But if that's another thing we can incorporate into our fee structure, I think that that would help people maintain a license.
So you're talking like dormant, so like as in I'm not practicing right
Yeah.
now. Okay.
So
Yeah, but like something that could be longer than a 3-year inactive period, maybe, but
Boy,
potentially.
I'm not sure I would agree with that. I mean, I think that's a long time. Is there a 3-year inactive period already? Well, you start
to reapply.
saying longer than that, and I think that becomes problematic. I think most professions would require you to have a new application
Reapply.
at that point.
Well, you have to do continuing ed in your inactive, right? Yeah, I remember that discussion.
So what would be the difference for us moving forward with the letter towards the legislator, like we just talked about, proposing that we extend that discount for another 4 years, versus writing a letter that includes that and proposing that we have a sliding scale for midwives that did less than 5 births a year, or whatever birth number that we decided. Those are two separate things. So because that would involve the legislator having to
So the
agree
fee,
to it, and then that's opening a can of worms is what you're...
well, if you're wanting to like permanently change the fee, so there's several different conversations going on here. So the fee is $800, regardless of what we keep talking about. The fee is $800. We now are offering a discount, because we do that through. But the fee's still $800. If you want to change that fee, that hard code fee dollar amount, that has to go through the legislation. If you want to do something in rule that's more of a sliding scale that says, you get a discount if you're this, and a discount if you're this, and this discount if you're that. That we can do in rule, but the fee's still $800. Does that make sense? So it's more in rule that says, okay, those of you that, but then it's like, okay, how...
Is there any precedence to that anywhere that you can think of? Nothing.
No.
Yeah.
So,
and how am I going to know that, okay, so you did 1 birth and you did 5, you get a discount. So, I mean, it's like, you're going to have to now start submitting more documentation?
No.
I mean, this is going to be,
No.
so this is going to get real hairy real quick.
And do
Even
not
if we
submit
just
Mana's
make-
cats.
one category. The discount for everyone is $200. It's going to stay at $600. The discount if you do less than 5 births in a year is $400. I'm just making that up. But like having it be a greater discount, that's just one separate category.
And
not
based on
inactive.
birth
If it was less than 10, it would be nice because then it would make up for having to do extra CEUs.
Yeah, but less than 10, I mean, 10 is almost one a month. That's not very inactive. That's a slow practice, but 5 is
Like part-time.
occasional.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you thinking, Sarah?
I'm thinking that some of the people that switch to traditional midwifery are people with low volume, often low risk, and that they're giving up their license because of the low volume that they have for whatever period of time. So I think that they're making, and I don't know, I can't imagine that they're giving up not bringing drugs to births. You know, it's a pretty serious thing for a person to do. So either we're encouraging people to go underground like we were back in the 70s, or, you know, we're encouraging unsafe practice. If that's why, if they're truly not a traditional midwife, and my guess is, based on the data, that we have people who can't afford the fees with that kind of volume. That would be my guess. And maybe they also want to avoid the bureaucracy of you know, the license, but my guess is that it's more often that they're just doing too low a volume. And so I think we're putting the public in danger.
So let's just...
I think these fees are dangerous for people with low volume practices.
Have you ever, this is Wendy, you've not surveyed people who've given their license up as sort of a post hoc kind of survey, why you...
That'd be interesting.
I have a list of all the traditional ones. Want to look at it? I only see one that jumps out at me as one that used to be
I feel like
licensed.
gathering more information could be helpful, like if there was a way to survey midwives.
Say like,
She's-
if the
she's
fee
switching
was
over.
$300, would you consider reinstating it?
Yeah. Or if you gave up your DEM license in the past 3 years, was it because A, B, C, you know, like...
You moved out of town, you
Right.
stopped practicing.
What was
or
that?
the
Why
fee was too
why
high.
did you give it
Yeah.
up? Right. And if there's a response that the fee was too high, that would be really good information to have. Not sure how we do a survey.
They have all.
I mean, if we're serious about offering a sliding scale, then we should
Who
we should
can do
do
birth
it.
certificates?
to find out. I mean, I don't know if people will respond or answer honestly or whatever, but there's not another way of gathering information.
I mean, asking these people, giving
Yeah.
them a questionnaire.
Just saying, was it because of the fees? Like, we're considering offering a bigger discount. I mean, can you do that?
Can you just ask them like, why,
Or is that-
what is your hindrance to licensure? Versus asking like,
If
is
it
it
was
the fees, if we did, you know what I mean, like,
More
answer the form,
open-ended.
just let them say, this is why, because it might be, I don't want to deal with the board, I don't believe in this, or it was the fees, or, you know, lots of reasons they could have it. And so if it's one person that says the fees were too high, and everybody else has other reasons
Yeah.
for it, then it
Open-ended.
doesn't.
I think that truthfully, the strap, just from what I heard, the IV strap, to some people was a step, you know, beyond, you know,
that we had to train for that?
yeah, that was a step beyond
So, but if that's it, then it's not.
traditional
fees.
midwifery. What?
No, it's not fees, so that's
Dropping
not.
No, I'm
fees
just
is
saying
not-
that's one thing I heard, was that was a step beyond. They thought it was becoming too medicalized.
But we'd want to survey more than the current licensees, right? We'd want to survey.
I could survey these guys too.
Who are these guys?
These are the, these are
Traditional midwives who have registered with Vital
Vital
Statistics
Statistics.
to be able to file birth
That's
certificates.
exactly who we want to survey.
That's who I would survey. That's who I would survey, yeah. And I
This is
agree,
our
an
second-
open-ended.
This is the second issue from our discount issue, so I feel like we should separate them. But I think it's a great idea, we could.
Go ahead, Kelsey.
We also aren't totally in the dark that the licensing fee is a barrier because we did receive public comment on it. during the proposed rulemaking, people were talking about how some people did see the increase coming, and were saying that it will have an impact on their businesses, that 600 is already having an impact, and 800 is even worse. So I think we do know that it is impacting people, because we've already received that comment.
But Kelsey, we don't know if they're really going to drop their license. I mean, they can say it's going to impact, anybody's going to say it's going to impact, but we don't know the reality of whether they really would drop their license.
Sure, I'm just saying that how much of an actual barrier it is at least perceived to be a barrier, that we have had feedback from the licensees about it.
Right, so that's just the general sentiment about the fee. And then the other issue is whether we would increase the licensees by actually having a greater discount for people that were less active. Which doesn't exactly, I mean, that's not the same as targeting just the unlicensed midwives, because there's licensed midwives that do less births also. But you kind of can't make too many categories, right? Already doing this one category, so I'm looking at your
Well, Sammy's got to do it, so Sammy's like, wait, what? And the thing is you could ask more than one question on a survey. We have access to what, SurveyMonkey, don't we? It's, you know, it doesn't mean people are going to respond, though. I mean,
I would think people would be kind of relish the ability to respond to something like
Midwives?
this.
Oh, they'll
Very
respond.
specific. Hell yeah.
But we can ask a couple different questions. So one question is, because we can send it out to a bunch of them, you know, are you currently licensed? Yes, no. And if they say no, what was your reason for not maintaining the license? Because you got
I'm not getting it.
Or not
maintaining
Or
or not
never
getting
being,
it.
right, maintaining.
Not getting
Yeah,
licensed.
and you obviously will pick better words, because you're going to send it out to a big group, right? So you want to send it out to current licensees and all traditional. Have you ever been licensed as direct entry midwife? Yes, no. Are you currently licensed as direct, you know? And just kind of ask these questions so that they kind of prompts them to say why, if I'm not licensed, why I'm not licensed. If I'm not licensed, why did I not get the license? And then also,
What's your practice volume?
how many births on average per year do you do?
And how many do you think
You
you
know.
do next? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, do you feel like that's going to go down? Do you think
Yeah, because we can say we're gathering information for the board, and the board would like,
about fees. I mean, I feel like
About-
we should mention that and not have it all open-ended, so that they know.
and we have SurveyMonkey, so we can start working on creating some stuff.
Okay.
I mean, it seems like we should do that before we propose the other thing to the legislature.
I think what we
because
need-
if we're going to include this also, we just have to go back again, right? Like,
So-
wait till we get the information from the survey.
It's gonna slow everything down.
And then decide whether to include that with what we just decided.
Or
which was
we
to
could
extend
just
do this?
move forward with extend, because all we have decided is extending the
The discount that
Discount
was in place.
for an
It's just getting
additional
it back
4
in
years.
place.
Right.
And then
So
we
we
can
could just do that, and then we could take our time with this information.
Okay. I just didn't know if it was more efficient to have all of it go to the legislature at the same time. Doesn't matter.
Do it once you. Okay.
Sure,
So
but
at
we
least
have
do-
At least there's that.
Let's just move forward with something.
At least
Yes.
there's that, yeah.
Okay.
600.
So we'll draft on, so start, if you want to, just email Sammy directly, remember, do not email each other. Email Sammy, say, here's another question I thought of that we could ask on the survey. And then we'll start just gathering it. We want to ask it like a lot of open-ended questions to try and get some information. We don't want to imply that you didn't renew your license because the fee was so expensive. Why did, what was your, because it may not necessarily be the fees. It may be I didn't want to do
Antibiotics.
that thing. Or,
My patients are no HP patients.
but yes, I mean,
don't have
there could be a whole gamut of things that are out there. And that'd be interesting information for you guys anyways.
Sure.
So, and it's all anonymous anyway, so it could be interesting.
Yeah.
But if there's other questions that you can think of that you guys would like to know, because it will go to everybody who's on this list. Oh, Maria, you want to switch back? You guys don't need to see Sammy's to-do list.
Oh.
But on the traditional midwife list, so that list, they're all registered with biostatistics. And then on our list, and then we don't have anybody else's list.
I could send it to birthing centers to see if we get any hits there.
Yeah, but if we're asking questions about an
Well, I
LDN
have to
license.
address it, particularly to licensed midwives, but,
But survey monkey needs to go out via emails.
yeah. I know I sent it to Melanie and she sent me an email. It's possible.
It kind of depends on what
But the
questions you guys want
midwives
to
at
ask.
the birth center already are, if they're licensed midwives, then they're already in that database because they're licensed. And then if they're nurse
That's true,
midwives,
she catch me.
Then
in the
then it doesn't matter about
because they pay a
fee.
different fee.
Okay,
Mhm.
that's a true point.
One less thing for you to do.
Yeah.
I like this. Okay.
Okay, so should we try to get how long does that take? The
What?
survey? I'm just wondering, I'm just thinking about the next meeting and we're talking about rulemaking for the other issues. Like, would a survey happen
Before then,
within 6
no.
weeks and then we could talk about that too?
You could probably talk about exactly what questions you want on that survey.
The results of the survey?
How about if I give you a draft of February, what the survey will look like?
Okay.
Okay,
In February.
February. And then you guys can fiddle with it and then we'll send it out.
Super. Okay, anything else? Seems like a lot.
So this is Sylvie, you are on item number 7.
Okay, executive session. The Board of, read this now?
Yep.
The Board of Direct Entry Midwifery will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.6602F and ORS 676.595 for the purpose of considering information related to investigative cases exempt from public disclosure at 10:58 a.m. on January 9th, 2020. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are required to leave the room. Are there any representatives of the news media? No. Recognizing there's no news media in attendance, all other audience members are asked to leave the room during the executive session. We will return to open session before making any final action or making any final decisions. We are now in executive session.
Or returning to regular session or whatever it's called.
The Board of Direct Entry Midwifery will now exit executive session and reconvene open session at 1:44 p.m. No final decisions were made and no votes were taken in executive session. Members of the audience are welcome to return and representatives of the media may once again report all board discussions and actions. There was no public members. So we can
No
carry on.
public came today, so. All right. It is proposed that in case number 14-7699, to issue a notice of intent imposing a $5,000 civil penalty and staying $3,000 of that civil penalty if the licensee does the following. Take a class on risk evaluation in relation to transferring care. Take a class on advanced fetal assessment. Submit an updated transport plan to the board. Review charts of 5 transfer cases with a board-approved supervisor. And assess the cost of the disciplinary proceeding against the licensee and offer the licensee the opportunity for an informal settlement conference and delegate to the chair the ability to sign and approve the final written terms of the notice of intent.
This is Wendy, and I...
So moved.
So moved.
This is Beth, I second.
Meredith, I vote aye. Wendy?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
Kelsey?
Nay.
Christine?
Aye.
Okay. It is proposed that in case number 16-8077, to close the case unsubstantiated.
So moved.
Name.
Christine.
I second.
Name.
This is Kelsey, I second.
Okay, Sarah?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
Wendy?
Aye.
Aye. Kelsey, gosh, sorry, I forget about you down there in the...
Aye.
Okay, it is proposed that in case number 19-9459, to close this case without action.
This is Wendy, and I move to close the case without action.
Christina, second.
This is Kelsey, I second. Sorry.
It's all right.
Okay, let's take a vote. Kelsey?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
Wendy?
Aye.
Meredith? Aye.
Excellent. So this is Sylvie, you guys are on item number 9. So that is other board business. So just a reminder, so hopefully everybody has written this down, but I will make sure that Maria or Sammy emails you that the February board meeting has moved from the
Already sent the
13th
email.
to the 27th.
I'm in the process of sending you.
Okay, and at that board meeting, we will begin wordsmithing. If you have any articles that you want us using for documentation, as we did with the other rule set, this is very specific to the 3 topics, right? So if you have any documentation that you want us using as reference material, we will make sure and add that to the list so that the public knows what materials we're using for reference. Anything else you want to talk about, you want to make sure that's on the agenda or on that meeting in February? You guys are all looking at me and not saying anything, so.
Oh, I have something.
Oh,
Can I go?
yeah.
So during the rulemaking, you guys had made notes of some things that may or may not need an FAQ, right? People have all of these questions, and so from June, July, August, September, October, November, I was just putting in the columns FAQ, FAQ, FAQ. But a lot of times you were going back to those and fixing them. So when Colleen was still chair of her last month, we met and we went back over that list, and we believed that you guys clarified all the questions. However, with the questions that had come up in comments, we believe you had fixed them within the rule. I didn't know if you wanted to look at that. Do we want to wait and see what happened, kind of let people work with the rules and see how they flush out?
So, long story short, Colleen felt like there was no need for a Q&A.
Right, like the
That doesn't mean that you
postpartum.
guys can't continue moving forward with having a Q&A, but they went through the rules, all the things that you had potentially said, put on the Q&A. So, because remember, we just kind of kept shoving that list over there. And then she reviewed all that and said, you know what, I don't think we really need to do this.
Because it was answered with how we wrote.
Right, so I used the proposed rule and then the comments, and saw what we proposed and what they commented, and then what we finally came up with. And every time, it looked to us, it could be, we answered the question.
What about things like the layering of multiple risk factors? Wasn't that going to be one of the things that we sort of brought up in an FAQ?
I guess I'd like to see the list again. It feels.
Let's bring you up, Maria.
Maria, switch back over again.
Or even at another meeting. I mean, it seems like a huge thing to tackle all the FAQs right now. I
think the question is, so we don't have to necessarily do it, but we do need to decide if we need to do it, because it sounds like Colleen is saying that she didn't feel like we did need to do it.
Well, yes, so here are all the questions, and then and then these are what the final rule looks like. So like the postpartum stuff, you guys clearly answered their issue in this F. Right, you can continue care even after, right? So we know you got to think through that.
Okay. What else was there? There's a lot.
I thought there was a ton.
There wasn't a time, no, there wasn't a time.
Was it that active pushing thing? Was that one of them? Or?
Do you want me to show you what you had proposed it
I
as?
guess so.
Okay. Let me just pull that right here. Okay, so that's what we proposed. I'm gonna make this bigger. This was the proposal. And then this is what you guys ended up with. Kind of hard to see like that.
So I have a suggestion.
Yep.
So remember how we talked about that monkey survey earlier? One of the questions that we can say is, anything about the new rules do you feel that the board should create a Q&A on?
To whom?
Because remember that survey monkey is going to go out to all licensees?
To licensees, yeah.
Also, Silke and Celeste and
Yeah.
Colleen are going out and doing
Outreach.
and so they were going to report back to me where there were still things that were unclear.
And we don't have like a time limit on this.
So are you comfortable with us not working on a Q&A for now? Why don't we wait and and we can invite Colleen back after she's gone out and done some outreach and see what the issues and concerns are? Does that work?
Outreach, like what particularly are they doing?
They're just going to each of the OMC regional meetings and just telling them what the rules say.
New rules.
The new
rules.
Yeah.
Because it would be, because they're the ones who are actually out there and like if getting the same question over and over and over. So whatever question you're getting over and over and over, let us know. We'll try and help address it.
Great.
Does that work with everybody? So then we're not spending time working on this if it's not really needed.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Do you have other things for her to work on instead? Like the survey?
I did do one question for you there, so your online renewal one. Did everybody get their email? Their online renewal email, only you two.
Nice.
Oh, you don't renew anymore. No fun.
She's retired. But you didn't get the email?
I don't remember.
Meredith, you probably got the email 3 times. As a board member out of E-Leads.
I'll search your name.
You just take a copy.
Give me a paper.
All right, anything else for February? Okay, anything that anybody want to talk about? Okay, you have on the green sheet, you have a one-liner about adjourning.
The Board of Direct Entry Midwifery meeting is adjourned at